Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, and together with my co-host Mark Ronich of Statewide News Service and jbiztechphilly.com, we have a very, very special guest with us, Mr. David Giwerc, and he is the Adhd Coach Academy and
founder and president.
Founder and president. All right, give you the right title. David, welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
You know, first things first, I know maybe it's a known phrase or abbreviation, ADD. Tell us what it is. Just let's get for the basics for if anybody doesn't understand, maybe including me over here.
Sure. Well, ADD used to be ADD and ADHD. Now the official diagnosis is ADHD, which stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And they used to think it only was discovered and identified in the diagnosis for young boys who are hyperactive and cause a lot of problems, of which I was one of those. But it's only in the last 10 to 12 years that they started identifying it in adults. And generally, ADHD is a bioneurological challenge of inattention, distractibility, impulsivity, and physical and excess physical energy and excess cognitive hyperactivity, lots and lots of thoughts. And these are symptoms that everyone experiences at one point in time, but for a person with ADHD, they impair their quality of life. So if you can't pay attention to your teacher, or you can't pay attention to the person talking to you, or you make impulsive decisions on the spur of the moment that impair your quality of life, there's a tendency to be diagnosed with ADHD. That's the simplest version I can give you of it.
You lost me at
bioneurological. That's my fancy schmancy word.
Yeah.
Well, and I call it bioneurological because scientific research, lots and lots of it has shown that there's a particular part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. It's the part of the brain that makes us human. And that's the part of the brain that's challenged in ADHD. Needs to be more stimulated and activated. Generally, people with ADHD, you can find them when they're bored. If they're really bored and you try to, if you try to get them going, I have ADHD. Yeah. I discovered it at age 38. And I probably was the first person in Albany to get diagnosed because most of the healthcare professionals did not think it existed. So I went to Boston and met with Ned Hollowell at Harvard and got all the research and brought it back and was diagnosed, and it made a big difference.
How do you get diagnosed? I mean, what did they think? You say when you get bored, I didn't get that.
Well, there's an actual set of diagnostic criteria. It's called the DSM-5 the psychiatrists use. But there's a simpler way. They have if you go to the World Health Organization, they have 6 questions. And depending on how you answer these 6 questions, it indicates that you have a propensity for these challenges of inattention, distractibility, and impulsivity. You should go get diagnosed. But you should only get diagnosed with somebody who's really well versed in this, a specialist. You know, a pediatrician that maybe's had a few cases with a child should not be diagnosing ADHD. These should be a specialist who understands, who's worked as a clinician with many, many patients. And fortunately, the problem with this is about 85% of the world population is undiagnosed, and it's not taught in a lot of medical schools. The way I learned ADHD was through my own research on myself and actually, working with clients over many, many years and seeing their impairments.
So what were your school days like?
Brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal. Athletics saved my life.
Right.
I was not diagnosed till I was almost 40. I'm 58 now, so it's about 18 years ago. I was diagnosed, and for me, everything that took anybody 1 hour to do took me 5 hours to do. But I never told anybody. I worked and worked and worked because of my parents. They instilled it. You can do it. You can do it. So things that were easy for others academically came very hard for me, except for I could speak off the cuff. I was able to speak spontaneous my idea. I was what we call a verbal processor. I think out loud, and I need things mirrored back to me to understand them. So when I would say things, if somebody didn't repeat it back to me, I didn't know some of the things I was even saying. So that was one thing. The other thing is I broke 2 couches by the time I was 7 because I was so hyperactive. I looked like I was davening on the couch. I was rocking. I broke 2 couches, literally. So my grandmother bought me a rocking chair, which I still have today, and when I need to think, I rock. You know, like a lot of religious people shuckle when they daven.
Yeah.
Well, I believe that helps their ability.
That's what it was.
I believe it.
That's why they should do it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, though, I've heard it before, and again, I'm just asking, I always say I'm the rabbi, and I'm not, a psychologist, and surely not a psychiatrist, which is medical. But I've heard then that maybe people have also, that in a way you could be like more of a genius, you know, that there's certain things that you may be so good at. Someone said a guy, oh, well, he's good. He listens to his teacher, does his homework, you know, like a, and we're using some Jewish words like a golem, like just a dumbbell.
Like a golem,
oh,
right.
You're normal. Just sit there like a dumbbell and the teacher loves you. You don't cause trouble. But someone who has hyperactivity, you know, they're super motivated and has super reactions, and they actually can accomplish a lot more.
Did you have a stuttering problem?
No.
No.
No, I didn't have a stuttering problem, but it's a good question. They're both good questions, and let me answer this. When attention is aligned with intention, when your purpose is clear, like, for example, many people with ADHD have strengths that have been buried. But like you said, the school system says these are the standards of performance that you must abide by. You must sit in your chair, you must shut up, and you must listen. You can't be curious, you can't be creative, do it our way or it's the highway. And when these kids are allowed to express themselves in their natural brain, see, we look at ADHD as a unique brain wiring because the brain has trillions of ways that it processes. So you have to find your way. For example, if many of my clients, if they're not allowed to move and they're bored, their brains will shut down. It's been proven. So the answer is many of people with ADHD are bipolar. A lot of these conditions they're what's called co-occurring conditions. So when you have ADHD, there's generally something else that runs with it, are brilliant. I had a client who was so dark and negative and saying how life was terrible. But what I noticed is we have a bias towards listening towards their strengths. Mm-hmm. They were so articulate and used such visual metaphors. I said, despite the fact that you are so negative, I've never heard anyone articulate their darkness the way you do. And I'm very clear that we can find the light at the end of the tunnel. Because and she actually told me, and I hear this a lot, no one had ever acknowledged her strengths because they didn't fit into the standards, the route that you're supposed to take. So I think a lot of problems with ADHD, not all of it, is that you are told how to think, you're told what to do, and they don't embrace, maybe you do it differently. Maybe you need to move around. Maybe you're very visual, and we need to let you draw. So yes, I've seen a lot of my clients over the years, I know that their brilliance is hidden, and once they discover it and embrace it, which takes a long time because they've been beaten up so badly, their brilliance comes through. And I have people who've had bankrupt businesses that turned them into millions. I've had people who couldn't get through their masters who've become PhDs because they figured out the way they did it. As an example, the book I wrote.
Yeah, here it is, just to show our audience. Permission to Proceed.
And I called it Permission to Proceed because people with ADHD don't give themselves permission to proceed in their unique way, their unique brain. It's about passion, purpose, and possibilities. The way I wrote that book, in college, when I had to get the ideas out of my head, it was like I felt imprisoned. I couldn't process and articulate what was stuck in my head. So now I'm 58, about 10 years ago they came out with voice-activated software, naturally dragon speaking. You put a headset on, you speak into it, and all the thoughts that had been imprisoned in my head came out on a piece of paper. And that's how I wrote the book.
Well, did someone edit the
Yes. Oh, I had an editor, yes. Yeah, but she said, you're prolific. Yeah. Nobody ever called me prolific. They called me a blabbermouth. You can't stop talking. And they made me feel bad.
It's great that what you're saying, and I appreciate it because, again, maybe I'm not quote-unquote a professional, but people do come to a rabbi with all kinds of problems. And, the more I'm getting educated, I hope our audience is also. But is there other, the trouble is, and I wanted to hear what you have to say, people say, well, go on medicine. Again, I'm not a psychiatrist. No, even they tell me the name of medicine, it goes in one ear and the other, tell you the truth.
Yeah.
But, that's why I know, they're hyper. Okay, put the kid on medicine.
Right.
I read that 30% of kids are on Ritalin, was a third of your classes drugged up just to sit there. I mean, I don't know if that's the big question. Is that a real issue, number one? Because like that, I'm just about your age, even though I say I'm 29. But in any case,
I am too.
I'm the old man here.
You're the elder coxswain.
But on the other hand, I never saw such a thing when I was a kid. And also, what's happening now? Are they overdiagnosing it? Are they? You're not a medical doctor, so you cannot give medicine and drugs to people. That's why I'm really asking.
But I have a strong strong opinion about it, and I've
that's what I'd
talked,
like to hear.
and I work with a lot of psychiatrists all over the country, and what I can tell you is this: I think people are diagnosed too quickly. Like you said, he's got impulsivity. Give him Ritalin. The diagnosis is made too quickly. A comprehensive diagnostic interview needs to be conducted with a real specialist, number one. Number two, the research from the NIH, the National Institute of Mental Health, and the U.S. Surgeon General shows that when the diagnosis is correct, first you have to get the right diagnosis, and that means going through a really rigorous interview. The medications really work. I had a belief system that taking medications made me broken. And I'm not ashamed to say that after 2 years of suffering, I take a medication that really dramatically improved my impulsivity and my ability to read a book. But that's a very personal decision. And by the way, 20% of the people who take the psychostimulants, which is the foundational medication, mitigate the impulsivity, the hyperactivity, and the ability to pay attention. But it has to be done
That's
scientifically.
only 20%. That's a low percentage.
Yeah, but still, there's 20%
All right,
it doesn't
that could
work.
be
But that
helpful.
80%, and I can tell you when they're diagnosed properly, the problem is many people are misdiagnosed. And the reason is because they're not educated well. One of the things that I pride myself at the Academy is we took all that esoteric, fancy schmancy language and we put it in simple terms. We have a course called Simply ADHD.
So you don't use bioneurological?
I don't say bioneurologicals,
Okay.
no, I don't say that. But when I want to impress people, I do. But I don't say it in the book. Like we have a model, the machine, the mind, and the mission.
Right.
The machine is your brain. You have trillions of ways you process, but the way you process is unique. And having ADHD does not make you broken, it makes you a unique brain wiring. You have to find out what activates your brain.
Well, that's why it's so. The cover is so appropriate because you're walking into a keyhole, and you're going to unlock
That's
whatever
right.
it takes.
It's exactly
to,
why.
To get you to communicate or focus or do what needs to be done to survive, and you need to. And every key has a unique hole and tumbler or
Yes.
or, locksmith.
Yes, it's a great
jargon
metaphor.
And, so-
Yes, and you have to find your own key, and that's what
Right.
people do. It's called neurodiversity. That's the
Okay,
fancy
that's
word.
another one.
And two
That's
things. Neurodiversity means we all have we all process things differently. We all learn differently, but we all have an inner
Right.
brilliance. And then there's neuroplasticity, and neuroplasticity means that everything we experience, everything we focus on, has the ability to change the architecture of our brain. So when we're focused on negative thoughts, that creates neurochemicals like adrenaline, which creates fight or flight and creates more anxiety, or cortisol.
That's what's happening in the classroom. Teachers
Yes.
say, and they know they're calling, your parent better get in here. Your
Yes.
kid, something's wrong with your
Yes.
kid. Oy vey,
Yes.
it's your kid's a loser, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
You're a loser, you're dumb, you're stupid, you can't sit in a class.
I was told I don't apply myself.
I was told the same thing.
There you go.
I'm
I
not.
don't
He's
apply
a
myself.
sweet kid, a
That's
nice kid.
right.
He's a smart kid, but he's lazy.
That's right.
He's not applying himself. And here's what the
And you
research
know
shows: when you try, and somebody tells you you have to do it this way, and you can't. It's not that you don't want to do it; you can't. Your brain actually shuts down.
But
shuts down.
But then again, in my high school, in 9th grade algebra, I had 12th graders in my class. So there was this real gap during high school because
Well,
I
there's
went to the high school.
intelligence or something.
Well,
There
this-
is intelligence.
Yeah, but
There is
high-
intelligence,
There was
that's
the
right.
show Welcome Back, Kotter.
Oh, I remember
was
that.
based
Gabe
on-
Kaplan.
Gabe Kaplan was my math teacher, Sal Pampalone, and all those characters were based on
That
my
was
high
your-
school.
that was your life.
Lafayette High School. That was
Wow.
mine.
Wow.
So they had Mark in there.
I love that show.
I was the Juan Epstein, the Puerto Rican Jew that,
Oh, I love him.
everything,
He's
yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah,
Oh, he
that's
makes me happy.
So that's where the characters all
But
came
it's
from.
true. But it's
And,
true. But
you
it's
know,
true. But there is intelligence, and there's
Yeah.
different. There's emotional intelligence
Is
too.
ADHD or ADD, which is attention deficit disorder.
It's really all now referred to
right.
as ADHD.
I understand, but still you have ADD Coach Academy, so people pretty much want to know why you're giving a math phrase when it means attention
Because
deficit disorder.
we created the name
Before
before the
ADHD,
H
right.
was made and you can still refer to it as ADD.
Right.
But the
So-
fact of the matter, it's all included.
Is that included on somewhere on the autism spectrum, or has nothing to do with autism spectrum?
As well, let me. It's a good question. ADHD can run with Asperger's, and some, which is on the autism spectrum. And in over 63% of the cases, the research shows that when you have ADHD, there is another diagnosable condition that runs with it. A learning disability, bipolar, anxiety disorder. Some kids can have 3 or 4 or 5 disorders at once, or an adult. And so you have to diagnose these, but they all can be coached the same way. You see, what really overcomes all of this is creating positive emotion.
But Mike, it goes back to my question. Is it worse today than it was, let's say, 50 years ago? I mean, they didn't have these things 50 years ago, so they could have you're just, like I said, you're a dumbbell and you get lost, you just flunk out of school. Or now, I mean, maybe, is it worse?
I think life was easier. I think life was easier when we were kids. I had ADHD and I got through. We had 3 television stations. You went out, you played ball, you went to Hebrew school on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and you did. And life was busy. And you didn't have all these distractions on the internet, and you exercised. Exercise is crucial for the brain. Now you got kids with social media, suicide rates are up,
that's what they're saying.
Self-esteem is down, and really what's the most important is self-compassion. That's the new buzzword. Self-esteem means that I judge myself based on my performance. If my performance is lousy, I'm lousy. And now there's such pressure on SATs and grades like never before.
Right, the Common Core. Yeah.
It's horrible. I go and I visit schools. I work with a couple of universities that we're doing projects with. We're doing research. And what I see is these kids are under tremendous stress to perform not in their natural ways. And so that's the first piece. The second piece is life was easier. It's tougher now. It's more competitive. The awareness is greater now than it was there. We didn't know what ADHD. The closest they came to naming it was, here's a real positive name, minimal brain dysfunction. How would you like to be called having minimal brain dysfunction? That's what they call it. Yeah, I mean, our ADHD is not even the real, it's really an executive function challenge, but they can't change the name now because it's all the legal books. So I think what's happened is it's gotten maybe worse in that people are making the diagnosis too quickly, and that there's more alternatives for medication than there were 15 years. When I was I bet you I was the first person to take one of the medications in this Capital District area because they wouldn't prescribe it till I could make a case, and it would dramatically help me. And I'd done my research, so I think there's more alternatives, and I think exercise is crucial to any brain, and there's less of that going on, and there's more pressure. So I think it exacerbates
So if a parent has an issue with a child, where would that parent go for help? Albany Med? Would it be, is there a certain...
Maybe Tim?
Well, the first thing I would suggest is get educated. It might be our place in terms of understanding their kids' ADHD. Because,
so how does someone contact you?
Well, we're on the website. We have all our classes. ADDCA.com.
Okay.
And
what's the phone number they could reach you?
It's an 800 number. Go on the site. I never call myself. I didn't think.
Yeah.
But ADDCA.com. And what we've done, and we're eventually going to create a public program. We're going to bring it out to the public. But right now, we have a 13-week, 90-minute session program. And people come out of that program and they say they understand ADHD for the first time in their lives. Because here's the thing. If you don't understand it, you can't get diagnosed properly. If
the doctor can't? Why?
Because the doctor says to me, tell me about your ADHD, and you say, well, I'm overwhelmed, I'm impulsive. You have to be able to articulate the impairing challenge very clearly, and that's what doesn't happen.
Let me ask you another factor, which is maybe not so...
By the way, I just want to say this. I'm not the only resource. I'm a very good one for education, but I think there are some wonderful practitioners in this area. Not a lot of them.
What, psychologists?
A psychologist
would
be.
What I was wondering.
There are some good psychologists. You go on, you find out your health care plan, and you ask, are these people, do they specialize in the treatment and diagnosis of ADHD?
Okay,
a psychologist can only diagnose.
If you don't have a health care plan, can you? Is it expensive then to go to these places?
Well, expensive is
relative,
but some of these people will take you in and they'll work with you. They don't want to see you suffer, you know. So there are really good practitioners here, but in all areas across the country, there are very few, and they're backed up for months. So we educate, and that helps a lot, because then they can go. I had a situation where the mother was going crazy with the kid, and she was exacerbating it because she was putting more pressure on her kid because she meant well. And I said, you have to do just the opposite. You have to find his strengths, and you have to help him understand the situations that impair his ability.
And you know what? There's a company called SAP which is a Spanish language interpretive thing, I think. But they're hiring people who are on the autism spectrum because
That's fantastic.
these are people who can focus on detail, who can
Unbelievable.
and work towards
Yes.
their strengths.
Yeah.
So these people this company is hiring the folks on the autism spectrum just because they are on, and they could be out and free, and they don't have to hide their autism and try to, like you were saying, they didn't want to say it, so they just struggled through privately in their own private torment. Now they're out in the open, and it's coming out, basically.
Well, I'll tell you this.
Another version.
It's a great point.
Yes.
And the point is this. If you look at research and you look at what's emphasized, it's always about negativity. It's always the impairing challenges. And there's very little research that says what's positive about these people. And Baumeister, who does a lot of research on motivation, said that the brain, the human brain, automatically goes towards negativity. Bad is stronger than good. All human brains, the ADHD brain is even more so. So when you start giving research and telling a person what's wrong with them rather than what's right with them, one positive feature of research that's come out is that young adults with ADHD score much higher on creativity scales and creative accomplishments than non-ADHD young adults in the area of ideation, which is divergent thinking, coming up with many different ideas for a boring thought. And the whole movement, the positive psychology movement, Martin Seligman, who is the father of positive psychology, he was a psychotherapist, and he started getting depressed because he said, all I'm looking at is what's the worst in people. Let's find out the best in people. So he hired 55 scientists. They did a 3-year grant, and they created this. Anybody can take it. It's called the VIA Character Strengths. And we have been given permission, the Academy, we're the only ones in the world to use that survey, which is really a very reliable tool that shows character strengths, like creativity, like fairness, like kindness. These are the source of inspiration that allow you to use your performance strengths.
Well, I've been reading Viktor Frankl.
He's my favorite.
Really?
In Man's Search of Meaning. I know that book by heart.
Yeah, that's an incredible book for anybody to take it out of the library, since we're in the library. But it is an important book because, again, I mean, the Rebbe, actually, the Lubavitcher Rebbe had a lot to do with him because he was depressed because everybody says, you're out of it. We're looking for Freud. What's your problems? And the Rebbe actually in the 1940s emphasized when he got out of World War II, says, you're doing right, keep going, and the whole world changed according to him. But one of the things I wanted to ask also, and you haven't brought it up, and it's one of my bugbears because I think I'm on the outside, is just that all well, now it's not I should say forbidden drugs, but it's like marijuana is now allowed, and that's why I say even in my synagogue, which should be more traditional people, we should legalize it, Rabbi. And I see the problems again because I do prison visitation #1, and people do counsel me, and I think that's leading to a lot of problems also.
Yeah, but it's medical marijuana. They're talking about
right, but not in Colorado.
Well, there's recreational use is dangerous,
right,
because it leads to harder drugs. And
THC,
the actual chemical part of it, makes you feel more creative, but also you get the munchies, you can put on weight. And
you don't know from this.
Yeah, and don't worry.
I got weight. I hope it's not.
You look good. But the research shows that marijuana in a recreational can lead to harder drugs. Now, I happen to know some people that have taken marijuana for years, and you'd never know it.
Right.
So there's this balance of legalizing and not. And I think right now it should only be legalized for medical terms only.
Well, that's
what does it do to other people? The bad side, though.
Well,
some kids are right. It's just like alcohol. Also, how many people drink alcohol? I say l'chaim too, and I'm not an alcoholic.
Right.
But on the other hand, there's a lot of alcoholism.
Well, it does do damage to the brain over long periods of time. It deteriorates part of the brain. The THC over periods of time.
But what if you're right on the border? Maybe
you mean of the medical issue?
Yeah, right. I mean, does it push people over? I mean, that's all they need. They're having problems with their mind, and they're taken now all of a sudden without a doctor's prescription, even obviously in New York State, maybe not in Colorado, but whatever.
First of all, it has to be regulated because the marijuana, when I was a kid, and the marijuana today is a lot stronger. And it's laced with all kinds of stuff. And what's happened now is marijuana is not the issue, it's heroin. I have somebody who just lost a 25-year-old boy to heroin overdose. Okay, but he started with heroin, he went to
Marijuana
cocaine.
Started- Okay.
Nobody
Mar-
you would know, but
Yeah.
No,
and-
but you know what? When you look at the medical, they're going to have it in the hospital only. It's going to be like
If it's
morphine
regulated,
at the end of life.
I have no
And,
problems with
yeah,
that. As long as it's regulated. Recreational use, because you don't know the source of it, you
Right.
don't know how it's monitored. You know, marijuana has been used for years by poets and creative people
Right.
that have been brilliant. But what kind of marijuana was it? How was it produced? How was it maintained? And they used it, you know, secretly, and they got through with it, and it didn't do any damage to society. But some of the stuff coming out now is unregulated, and it's being sold, and it's laced with all kinds of stuff, and it's doing damage to the brain.
Now, I've known people at the Capitol who kept a bottle of scotch in
Right.
their bottom drawer.
And that's
before-
legal.
Before they have a meeting,
Right.
they'll take a shot of scotch because it makes them feel more confident. And before they go onto the floor to debate something, they'll have a swig of scotch. Reporters also
Yes.
would, you know, if they had to, it's what called courage juice.
Courage juice.
Courage juice.
Oh, wow.
And
I never heard that,
They would
yeah.
take the shot of scotch before a news conference, a governor's news conference, because they would give them more courage to get up and ask a tough question. So
As long as it
this
doesn't
is
lead to
something-
more drinking. My grandfather,
Oh, it
96,
did.
may God rest his soul, had a schnapps every day. One
I know the
schnapps.
synagogue.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but,
do.
but,
one
but you know what?
schnapps, yeah.
That's different than you know.
Right.
So you
Right.
have the scotch in the bottom drawer. Then you go upstairs and you play cards in the press room, and then you're having more scotch.
Then
there.
it's- then
then you're playing pool, or then you're going out after session and you're having more scotch, and you know you had like 7-8 glasses of scotch a day.
Well, if you do
And-
enough of that, you're actually destroying brain cells that can't be
Well, that could
regenerated.
explain the reporting that they've done and how.
And the liver and the kidney and all. I mean, these are the legal medications
Right.
that are prescribed. These are tested by the NIMH for 7 to 10 years. It takes a long time. I'm not ashamed to say, I've been taking my medication for almost 20 years. My blood pressure is 120/80. My cognitive intelligence is just as good. As a matter of fact, I process better than I ever have before, and I'm healthier than I ever
Can
have
you
before.
feel comfortable disclosing what you're taking?
Yeah, I take Adderall, which is what's referred to as a psychostimulant, and it's the fast-acting, because I tried everything else, like the Concertas and the Vyvances, which the distribution systems are longer acting. You only have to take it once a day. I have to take mine every 4 hours if I so choose. So I forget sometimes, but what happens is my brain will tell me,
Really?
oh yeah, because I'll start to lose
Feel the
attention.
difference.
I'll feel more impulsive, but I've always been an athlete. I've always exercised.
You have. I mean, remember at the Albany JCC, you were always athletic. You were
Always played
there.
played ball in high school and
Yeah.
college. So that improves the efficacy of the medications. And in fact, if I need 4 doses, I only have to take 2 if I work out. And the research shows exercise, vigorous exercise, 3 to 4 times a week, 30 minutes, significantly improves brain function. And all mental disorders. As a matter of fact, it's the #1 option for minimizing depression. By far, over medications. Now, if you have the both, that's good. But I got through life through exercise without medications for 40 years of my life. But I struggled. I struggled. When I was in business with my dad, and I think he had undiagnosed ADHD because it's heritable. You get it from somebody. And I think my dad got it, and we worked together in Elma States. So he would dump all the stuff he hated to do on me, and I had piles like this, and we would have major fights. Then I was diagnosed, and I started to say, hey, Dad, how about hiring a secretary to take care of these things? And I saw his challenges, and we got along better than we ever did before because I understood what was getting in his way, and he understood. And he actually, when we sold the business, he supported me mentally. He loved. In the beginning, it was ADD, schmadd, you know. But when he got to know it, he said, "Wow, I really see a difference in you and the people that I was, working with." And now the Academy, we're global. We have people who have been trained with us from over 25 countries. We do it through teleconference, and it's making a huge difference, But it has to start with education. Taking all that mumbo jumbo and making it so everybody can
self-educating for themselves, meaning.
Wow.
It's interesting because usually you don't hear that even from a doctor. Well, if you have a problem, read up on it. Just say, just come to me and I'll take care
not
of
gonna
it.
happen.
Usually Very interesting that you even say that point, that you have to self-educate yourself. You usually say, come to me and I'll take care of it.
Well,
Just come to my office.
And here's what I would say about self-education. Self-education means you make a conscious choice to get involved with a group of people that know how to educate you so you can advocate for yourself. It's more about self-advocacy. And when they come to our program, we have instructors like myself who we train to get everybody involved in learning about their ADHD. About 75% of the people in our program have it. The other 25 are parents or partners who have it. This is not a disorder that you manage just with the person. You have to manage the family too. Because I can have great success with an adult or a young kid, and one word from a parent or a wife can negate all that. Oh, you're so lazy, you're not trying hard. I've had kids who are getting straight A's, and a school psychologist said, ADD doesn't exist, and you shouldn't be taking his medications, and he failed after getting straight.
After taking off the medicine. You mean?
No, the psychologist was ignorant.
Just to say it?
Just to say it. He negated it. He negated what the kid was going through.
How many years have you been on your medicine?
20.
20 years.
Almost 20 years, yep.
Wow.
And this was at a time when they knew very little bit about it, but the research had showed it was very safe. The medication that I used to be used for obesity. It's an amphetamine. Yeah, and some of these medications have multiple uses. And I will tell you, when it worked for me, I actually felt the impulsivity, and my brain was working so fast, it slowed down.
Well, Viagra was supposed to be used for something else, and not for
well, that way I didn't go.
That was something else. So
that was another kind of fast.
No,
okay?
I'm just saying they have medicines, that are studied for one type of
that can work for something else,
and then it works for something else.
Exactly.
And that's.
But Viagra would not be one of
them. So that was.
But that's what really happened. Amphetamine salts worked because what happens is it's a challenge of activating, stimulating, and inhibiting.
Right, right.
But so what happens is your brain goes too fast. You got to stop it and filter out the distractions. And when you're bored, you have to activate it or stimulate it. So it's a challenge of stimulation and inhibition. Our brain, we call it the power of the pause. People don't know how to pause. They're going so fast, they don't even identify when they're angry or they're upset. It's called emotional intelligence.
What's the financial